week, I had a very interesting situation that happened. We got a call this week that from a cousin that I've never met her before, and didn't really knew she existed until like a couple of months ago. She's like a cousin of, like, she's like my second cousin, but my mother's great niece. So she called us this week and she's like, my aunt is in the hospital, which is my mother's niece. And I'm not really sure how old she is, probably maybe in her 60s or so. And I had never met her either. We only kind of corresponded on social media. And I think maybe when I was a kid, I probably met her, but I know of her family. So when the niece called, she was crying and she was saying, Vanessa's in the hospital. And, at 2:00, we're going to pull the plug. Her family has made the decision to pull the plug. And we're like, wait, what? What happened? So apparently, she had to go to the hospital because she was having some issues. Is my lighting feels off. Is it me? No? Is it just me? I think it's probably just me. so you kind of look up and you're like, wait a minute, is the lighting good? All right. So anyway, we get this message that, the family has decided to pull the plug at 2:00. And we're like, wait a minute, what happened? So apparently she was having some issues and she ended up going to the hospital and they were going to do an emergency surgery on her gallbladder. But before they could even do that, she had a heart attack. And then they tested her and she had COVID. And then all of her vital organs like literally started to fail within a matter of minutes. So they're like, well, at 2:00, they're going to, pull the plug. But we're going to send you guys a Zoom link if you want to see. And I'm looking at my mom like, is this something that we want to watch? We want to witness somebody having the plug pulled like this? It was just, everything happened so fast and it was so bizarre. And we were like, okay, well, we'll sign on to the link. And I'm looking at my mom, I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? But in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I can't watch this. I can't do it. So, we're looking at the clock and it's almost 2:00. So we get signed in and everything. And, other people are on and people are crying and people are praying. And it was just, I don't even know what I was feeling. I was just feeling kind of numb about the whole situation. And as they were, preparing her to pull the plug, I wanted to see what was going to happen because I've never experienced anything like that before. And I mean, in this climate that we're in, she has had COVID, so her family couldn't be in the room with her. That's why they did the Zoom link. And it was just the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I guess I was thinking that what I would see is maybe like her body responding to them pulling the plug on her, but her body didn't respond. It was like, they were like, okay, her blood pressure is this, and, we're going to take her off this medication, take her off this medication, take her off that medication. And then it was kind of like a countdown kind of a thing. And, they finally end up pulling the plug and like her body didn't respond to that. It was just like, and people were praying for her to come back. And I'm thinking maybe she doesn't want to come back. Maybe she's, at peace at this point in her life. And I was just numb to the whole situation. I was emotional because, watching other people and their response and the crying and the wailing. And it was just, I was responding to that more so than actually having somebody's life just gone in an instant. It was bizarre. And it was, I don't know, I felt like I should have been feeling something different. So the next day my mom's like, how did you sleep? And I'm like, well, I was fine. So it's been probably about 2 or 3 days now. And I'm just kind of feeling like your life is just, her life, I mean, literally her life was just reduced to her lying in this bed and somebody making a decision if she was going to stay or if she was going to go, but her vital organs were like literally crashing. So they really didn't have a choice. But I'm just like, that was such a traumatic experience. But I think we get so, and that's what I was telling my mom. I was like, I think we're just so at a point in life where we're just so desensitized by things that happen in our lives that we just kind of, it's like a bump in the road. The bump, it's kind of like a speed bump. You go over the speed bump, you feel it, but then you just keep going. You just keep going. And I think we minimize things that happen in our lives. It's like it's traumatic, but we don't respond, or we don't know how to respond, or we just, I don't know. It's a weird space to be in. Mm-hmm. And I've just kind of been thinking about that over the last couple of days. It's like, oh my God, we're watching someone die on Zoom? What? It's like watching a movie. It was just unreal. Like, what the hell is going on right now? And like I said, it just happened so quickly, you couldn't even really gather yourself to really, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like, what? So I guess I'm still kind of trying to figure out what kind of space I'm in about it. You just kind of go along your day, but then you're like, wait a minute, that was traumatic as, mm-hmm. Now what? Have you ever had those moments in your life where you're like, it's traumatic, but what?
Yeah, I think, first of all, sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I think death is an interesting topic. Like, I know when my sister passed, it was such a traumatic moment for me. I mean, I thought life was ending. But then I also think that it changed the way I now look at death. Mm-hmm. And I'm very different in the way I think and feel about death. So I normally don't say my opinion, but since you asked me, I'll tell you.
Yeah, but, absolutely.
Like, I just think that we as society, we don't really accept it. Mm. And we don't teach, there's no way to kind of teach someone about death, right? But what I've learned is that it's so normal, it's so part of life, it's supposed to happen when you least expect it, but it doesn't have anything to do with you, right? But we internalize it like it's us. Mm-hmm. But it's nothing to do with us, it's the other person and their body and their soul, like what's happening with them.
Yeah.
And I wish that we could teach people how to process it as like every time it should just make you more grateful, or it should just give you a sense of like, kind of like, wow, thank you for that, because now I take life a little bit more seriously, or it's changed me, or I've learned something. I don't know. That's kind of how I process it.
Yeah. And I found myself saying, I was like, God, please, I don't want to leave here with all of this inside of me. There's so much that I have to do and so much I have to give. I want to be able to leave here completely empty and I want to be able to do what I came here to do, in a more magnified way. So it's just, that's kind of the feeling I was left with. I just want to be able to complete the mission, so to speak. You know what I mean? I just want to be able to do everything I came here to do. And I don't know, what that is per se, but I just want to feel, because I feel like there's so much left in there, and I just want to get it all out. And that's kind of what I was thinking. I'm like, man, because I know when my dad died, I probably was like 27 or so. And it was sudden. It was unexpected. He died at work. And it was like, he was here one day and then gone the next. And it just happened so quickly. It's different when someone is sick or, at some point, they're not feeling well or they're not doing well and they pass away. So you kind of have moments where you kind of preparing, so to speak, But when someone dies suddenly, it's just like life just changes in an instant. And you just, I don't know, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting the effects that these things have on us that we don't even realize that, like I said earlier, it's just we're just so desensitized by traumatic things that happen in our life. And I think, we define trauma differently. I may think of something, a situation, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's, so traumatic. And another person may look at the situation as like, it's no big deal. And I think we just have been conditioned to be resilient, I guess. I don't know. Like, what do you think when you think about trauma? What do you think about how we're living in trauma and how we just continue to go on? Like, what are your thoughts on trauma?
I think trauma is defined by the fact that it still holds a place inside of you that causes some sort of pain or anger or something like this. Because when you look at anything that's happened to you and you've accepted the situation and you moved on, you don't look at it as trauma. You look at it as, I've accepted the situation and moved on. But trauma is one of those things where it's like emotionally scarring. It's so damaging to the body. But it's almost just, I guess I always pick and choose when I say trauma, because yes, I've had some things happen to me that before would have been said as trauma, but now it's not. It's just something that has happened.
Right.
So I think it's also interesting when we look at it from that perspective of like, what is trauma?
Yeah. I think it's the emotional part that you talked about that can find people stuck in that place where they can't really move forward. It's like, okay, the situation happened or the whatever happened, and you've moved beyond that point, but psychologically, mentally, you're still kind of stuck in that. You can be stuck in that place. You can move beyond it. You can heal from it. But I think sometimes people get stuck in a place where they can't move forward. They just can't move forward.
They can, they just don't know how.
Yeah.
Because whenever you have some sort of trauma and you want to share it or something, it's like you're asking someone else, can you feel my pain? You're not sharing, because no one has that experience to be able to share it. Like, it's just not what life is. But you're asking someone to feel that pain with you. Like, can you feel it? Can you recognize? Either can you feel it or can you recognize that I'm in it? That's the question, essentially, not the other thing. But how do you know how to get out of it? I mean, that's another standpoint. That's another question that people have to want to know, what it feels like to not feel the situation as trauma, right? Like, we can choose to say, okay, I don't want to feel like this is my life trauma anymore. I want it to feel as if it is something that has happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think trauma too, it creates, or it can dictate how you move forward in life. Let's say you've had a series of traumatic things that happen in your childhood. Like a lot of the young people that I've worked with over the last 20 years, like a lot of these young people have had things happen to them that most adults can't even comprehend. I mean, just one thing after the next, after the next. And it's challenging for them to process something like that at such an early age, at 12, at 8, 5, it's like it's just life is happening. You don't know you're in a traumatic situation, but what happens a lot of times is those things that happen in your life as you get older, you start to wonder, why you behave a certain way, why you do certain things that you do. And a lot of times it's related to things that have happened in your childhood. A lot of times we try to minimize, people are like, oh, childhood experiences, it's not that big deal. It doesn't, it doesn't really affect you in adulthood, but it does. It really does. It's called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, has an effect on your later life, what's happening with you as an adult. And a lot of times it's challenging for people to move beyond that. It's very challenging. And I can think of, and one of my aunts, she just had a series of just bad experiences. She had a child that died, and it's just, she just could never move beyond that space. So in order for her to cope with and deal with that, she started drinking. Mm-hmm. And that was, a lot of times people use substances as a way to numb the pain of feeling what they're feeling every day. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to move beyond that space when constantly you wake up every day and it's just like, it's just those thoughts currently just going every single day. And I remember someone that you introduced me to, Gabor Maite, he was talking about, some of the addictions that he suffered with. And he was saying that, we always look at the behavior, but we rarely look at what's causing the pain. There's this addiction, but what's the pain behind that addiction? Why is this person doing this thing? There's got to be something behind that's causing this behavior. And it's not, making an excuse or letting people off the hook, but there's a reason why these things are happening. Mm-hmm. And it's something that, we should explore. Talk more about Gabor Maite and what you learned from him.
Wow, he's such an incredible person, first and foremost, because he always uses himself as an example. Mm-hmm. And it's so great that he's helped people get over addictions and so many other things that they have going on by what you said, by how he said we have to look at the bigger picture and where it's actually coming from, and we have to, he's basically saying that we just have to start learning how to accept the situations for what they are and start there. Mm-hmm. And just be okay with it and know that like you have a choice of how you want to handle it or how you want to feel, and it's up to you. Yeah. Really to want it or not, because unfortunately life happens to everyone in different degrees. And yes, obviously, some of us have experienced things that not many other people have experienced. Mm-hmm. And so I think in that sense, he's amazing. He's saved so many people. He's really taught people to deal with their demons, deal with their battles, deal with the trauma, deal with it. Like you have to deal with it. You have to figure out a way to process it. If you want to process it as trauma, then it will show up as trauma. And then whatever happens after you process it, then that's the way you go. But if you can look at it and address it and find a new way to cope with it, mm-hmm. and make it not trauma, but make it something else, or make it your excuse to help others, or I don't know, find a different way to process it, then you can move on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. What do you think about predisposition to people being predisposed to depression or substance abuse or any other thing that, like when you go to the doctor for the first time, they want to know your family history. Are you, does breast cancer run in your family? Does, this run in your family? What do you think about people being predisposed to emotional, I'm not sure what word I want to use, but let's say, for instance, if, and I'm just thinking about what happens to a baby in the mother's womb. And if the mother is experiencing emotional distress, that's the word I want to use. If the mother is experiencing emotional distress, what do you think is happening to that baby? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's being passed on, just like the drinking, just like, you know, we have to address all of these things like diabetes. I mean, whatever it is, we need to always include the emotional standpoint of it, or the depression or things like that. Like, it's real. Yeah. At this point now, we have too much science. We have not even too much science and psychology mixed together to help us see what's actually happening. So know your family history in that aspect too, and not be afraid of it, because if you know that it's a part of the history, then you can get help and you can treat it, or you can notice it, or your doctor can, instead of prescribing you pills for depression, I mean, fine, start going to a psychologist at a young age so that you can be aware of what is depression and when you're getting into it, and how can you help yourself, and what should you do. And there's so many things, and there's too many amazing free stuff, paid stuff, sponsored stuff. There's just loads of information out there. And if you want the change in your life, it's available to you. Just start with a search. I mean, just pull up Google and just start searching. There's loads of information, and there's loads of people sharing it, and there's loads of people who have gone through it, so that you don't have to feel bad about it. But we really have the power. And it's in your hands to go and take care of that stuff and understand it. There's no excuse that you can't. So I personally don't like that when someone has something that I'm like, no, go learn about it. Go, everything is treatable. But how deep, how vulnerable are you willing to get to treat it? Are you willing to go dig out 20 years and figure out how to process it the right way so that it doesn't become trauma? Or do you want to just leave it there? Because if you want to leave it there, no problem. But that's going to come with whatever that comes with. Stress, emotional, like, it's going to come with a lot. So it's up to you. But I really encourage people to do that. It doesn't always feel good, but the things that we want most in life don't always come easy. They don't always, everything's not handed to us in a silver platter to say, here, it's so easy. And we shouldn't expect that anymore. We really shouldn't expect it. And when you can humble yourself. When you can humble yourself to accept that in your life, then accept that amount of self-love, please.
I agree. I totally agree. So the next episode, I would like for us to talk about like the healing process and how that works and what we were able to do to, become more enlightened people. I know you talked, this week on your Instagram about the inner child. So I want to kind of dig around a little bit into that and talk about Louise Hay and, all these other, people that we've tapped into to become more enlightened beings that, that we are, because it took a lot of work for us to get to this place. And we're still working every day. We still, strive to be better people, because that's my mission. And I know, that's something that's important to you too, is you just want to be better in whatever way you can. And I think it's important for us to understand our history and to understand, things that happened before we even got here. You were saying earlier about Googling something. I want you guys to Google the word epigenetics. It's EPIGENETICS, epigenetics. I'm not going to tell you about it. I want you to go and do the research so you can learn more about yourself and learn more about your history and, talk to your family, ask questions. I mean, during these last couple of years, during COVID, and it's the weirdest thing, I've just been asking my mom all of these different questions about what I want to know about certain things, because certain questions pop up. I'm like, oh, let me ask her this, or let me find out more about this, or this family history, or that family history. Talk to your people. Find out about more about who you are. You can find out a lot about yourself by asking questions to your family, and getting more insight about what was going on with your family. And that may shed some light onto you and your life and how you can be better people. So, yeah.